If you want to be a great tennis player, then you must do the 3 things revealed in this video, period. The best players on your local courts do them and the weakest ones don't, so don't miss any of these insights because they'll level up your game fast. Hey, my name is Ian, and since 2009, I've uploaded over 2,000 free videos that have helped more than 1 million tennis players improve. Let's dive right in. The first thing that the best players on your local courts do is anticipate. Average tennis players react. This is my buddy Trey from Winners Only Tennis from a year ago, and I want you to watch his opponent on the other side get ready to hit a serve, and we're going to pause the video as the serve is getting hit right here. And if we go over and take a peek at what Trey is doing, question for you, has Trey moved yet? Is he doing anything with his body? He's in a decent ready position. He generally looks like he's ready to play tennis, but he hasn't done anything yet. And as I inch forwards in the video, he doesn't actually start doing anything until here. And at that point, the ball is already most of the way to the net. And so by definition, Trey is being reactionary. He's waiting and watching to see what's going to happen, and then he's reacting afterwards. Contrast that with somebody like Novak Djokovic. We're going to do the exact same analysis here. Tsitsipas is making contact with his serve right there. And if we zoom in on Novak at that moment in time, look at how he's airborne. He's already done something. He's already put his whole body into motion. He already has kinetic energy that he can now harness and flow around the court. So when he recognizes where the ball is going, he already has energy and momentum. And watch how his right foot seamlessly slides towards the ball. And so from this position, he's literally coming down in a running position. He's hitting the ground running, literally, which is why he and all the best players you see on TV are able to move around the court so fast. And it looks like they already know where the ball is going because they already did something before they knew where the ball was going. Here's 2 simple exercises you can do at home to start flowing around the court and hitting the ground running just like your favorite players on TV. The first drill is I'm having my student simply practice lifting up and then coming down, hitting the ground running, just like Novak was. So watch her do this in real time. This is the first time she's ever tried this or practiced this. She's coming up and then seamlessly coming down and flowing her energy first to the right to practice what it would feel like to lift up and then use her energy and momentum to propel herself in the direction of the ball. Now we're going to see her do the same thing moving to the left. So she's just practicing the coordination here of lifting and then recognizing, obviously in this example situation, okay, now the ball is going to the left, and then propelling herself seamlessly in that direction. The second drill you can do to start getting the hang of timing this correctly is practice with a partner. Have your partner stand a little bit in front of you, put their arms straight out to the side with a ball in each hand, and then right as you lift off the ground, they're going to drop either the ball to the right or the ball to the left, and then you're going to practice reading which direction you need to move in and seamlessly transitioning your energy and flowing it in whatever direction the ball goes. So watch my student here a couple of times find the right timing, find the right flow, and now she's starting to practice with her body and with her eyes and with her brain, anticipating, and instead of like standing there and watching and waiting, she's proactively activating her body and then seamlessly flowing her momentum in the direction the ball goes. If this video has already been helpful, it would really mean a lot if you would click the like button. Thank you so much for supporting my videos. The second critical part to being a good anticipator is moving yourself to the right position before your opponent hits the next ball. So in singles, doubles players, I'll get to you in a second. In singles, when the ball is in the middle, these 2 yellow X's signify kind of the 2 furthest most points that our opponent could hit on the other side. And when they're in the middle, and these are the 2 furthest extreme shots that they could hit. These blue lines are where those balls could travel after the ball lands in the court. Then the middle of those 2 spots that the ball could go is actually in the middle. So in this particular point scenario, before this shot gets hit, ideally we're putting ourselves right in the center of the baseline. Now the location of the ball has shifted, so the angles available to our opponent have completely changed. If they target a down the line shot, the furthest we're going to possibly have to run to the left is just to the single sideline. They can't hit to the outside of that, and it's a straight shot. The ball is traveling with no angle. But in the other direction, the angle has been maximized. So if they target that location and the ball keeps traveling out past the sideline, we have twice as far to run. So that means that the middle is no longer the actual center of the court. Now, before that shot gets hit, ideally, we're placing ourselves somewhere around here so that we're putting ourselves halfway between the two most extreme locations that our opponent might make us run. If you wait until after they hit the ball and you're standing in the center, you are giving them extra space, you're creating extra running for you, and the definition of anticipating is being aware of that and shifting appropriately to minimize your running. Here's how that looks in the other direction. Now our opponent is off to the right, which means that they have a straight shot here and a very angled shot here, which means the middle for us is no longer the middle. Instead, we need to shift over and account for that spread of angles that our opponent has. And again, this needs to happen before they hit this shot, ideally. We don't always have the time to do that perfectly, but you should be striving to do it each and every time the ball goes to a different location. You should also be anticipating and moving to another location yourself to reflect whatever opportunities they have on the next shot. Here's a real-world example of our buddy Trey of what not to do. By the way, Trey's improved a lot over the last year. This is from a year ago. So here's the point scenario. His opponent hits the ball to the middle. Trey hits a fantastic shot that pulls his opponent off the court. And so while his opponent is running in this direction, where does Trey need to move to? Well, where he decides to move to is just simply back to the center. And good job on this one, Trey, using a split step. But where does that leave him? He's actually a little bit to this side of the court. And the furthest he's going to have to run in this direction is right there. But what about in the other direction? If his opponent hits a great angle over to this spot, he might have to run way off the court over in this direction, which is significantly further. So he is not anticipating the correct geometry here based on where his opponent is, and instead he's leaving himself really exposed, which leads a lot of tennis players to missing shots, losing points, losing matches that they just don't have to lose. Here's what it looks like when world-class players do this. They start off with a cross-court return. You can see Novak's like super eager here, and he realizes there's a lot of court open in the other side, so he's hustling to try to catch up and make up for that. Tsitsipas tries to go in that direction, kind of just goes to the middle. And now watch as both Novak and Stefanos get set up for a cross-court exchange here on the ad side. The ball is a little bit on this side, so Novak is a little bit on the other side. And so he's respecting the geometry here. Tsitsipas hits cross-court, and look at where he stays in split steps because the ball is on this side and Stefanos is a little bit on that side. He's appropriately balanced based on the angles. Novak hits back cross-court, and watch how Novak is content to just hang out there. And so a lot of times you'll see these exchanges in singles back and forth because both of these players understand that if they go the other way, they've got a lot more running to go in the other direction. And eventually in this point, the direction does change. And watch when Novak hits this down the line, he shifts over to the other side, and now they're on the other side. And now we're seeing an exchange back and forth, deuce side to deuce side. Smart tennis players are constantly kind of feeling the temperature of the point, deciding whether it's a good idea to go down the line or not, because they know when they do, they've got to flip-flop and go all the way to the other side of the court. Doubles is totally different because we've got two players, one for each side of the court, and so the most important real estate in doubles is always in between those two players. The center is where most balls travel through in doubles. And yet, your average tennis player is very concerned with protecting their alley, and your average tennis player is also very concerned with watching the ball. And so you combine those two things, and we leave a huge gap in the center and very little awareness of what our opponents are doing, and so our reaction time is really bad. So here's what those mistakes look like in real life. Look at the position of the net players here. One of them is actually in the alley, preemptively, before the point even starts. And the other one is almost in the alley, which means look at this gigantic chunk of court. Oh, look, I just drew Mickey Mouse. In the center of the court, you could literally drive a freight train through the middle of the court here, even though it's the most high-value real estate in doubles, which is crazy. So as the point gets started here, and the middle is wide open for anybody to hit you, as this ball goes towards the center, I want you to watch the response here of this player. What he should be doing is going back to cover the center because it's the most vulnerable and easy spot to hit on the court. And what he should be watching is this player to see if this player is going to come across and intercept a ball in the middle and try to attack and hit the ball at the other net player. So instead, what he does is he turns around and watches his partner and runs away from the center of the court. So this player has no idea what the other net player is doing, and he's running away from the highest value chunk of real estate on the court. And so we all know that this baseline player doesn't want to hit it to that player, but guess what? A lot of times they'll make some kind of move or you mistime your shot or something, and so the ball goes to that player, and this person is actively abandoning the most important chunk on the court. So this is just the opposite of what your mindset should be on the court. There's no visual focus on the right thing. There's no physical presence in the right place. And so we're just making the job of our opponents super, super easy. Now let's watch how the Bryan brothers are very, very different. So right now we're in the middle of a point. A ball is just about to land back here on the baseline. And so we're kind of just starting from a neutral position right here. And I want you to look at the net player of Mike, how he's actually a little closer to the center line than he is to the sideline. He's slightly favoring the middle because he understands the odds of hitting this shot are much lower than the odds of hitting this shot. So he's purposefully leaning a little bit to put a little bit of extra pressure on the baseline player and to statistically give himself a little bit better chance of getting involved in the points. Now this ball does go cross court, and now I want you to watch his response at the net. Look at where he's looking and look at where he's going. As this ball travels cross court, his focus is squarely on the other net player with his eyes, while his feet are moving in this direction because he knows he's responsible for blocking up the center of the court if that net player gets the ball. Now, of course, he knows his partner does not want to hit the ball to that net player, but if for whatever reason the net player does get it, it's his responsibility to cover that spot. And so he's watching that net player to try to get an early indication of whether or not that net player is going to get the ball, and he's preemptively moving to cover that spot in the event they do get it. He is anticipating with his eyes, with his feet, with his position. Instead of being reactionary, he's doing something ahead of time to be in the right position and focus on the right thing so that he can be prepared for what's coming next, instead of waiting and watching to find out and then doing something afterwards. The second thing that all the best players on your local courts do and all the average players don't is use the kinetic chain properly to hit powerful shots with very little effort. So you can really see this in action if you just focus on Roger's right leg right now. You'll notice that initially that right leg starts to straighten right now. And then you'll see his hips start to unwind next. That's happening right now. Then his chest starts to unwind and follows his hips. That's starting to happen right now. And then his arm and his hand follow behind what his chest is doing. That's starting to happen right now. And so what that results in is his hips leading, his chest and his shoulders turning and leading, his legs pushing up from the ground to provide more rotational energy to his hips and his shoulders. And it's all of those things together that allow and enable his arm to be so loose and smooth and passive. If he didn't do that whole chain in that order, his arm would have to move the racket for him, and now things get really rigid and tight and tense and inefficient and weak. By the way, it's also the early turning of the hips and the shoulders that leads to, this is a result of good kinetic chain. Making contact out in front is not something you should be working on. It's something that should naturally happen because your body went before your arm. And a good, smooth, loose follow-through over on the other side of your body is not something you should be working on. It's something that naturally happens if your body turns first and leads and you have a correct kinetic chain. So this is what it looks like when that chain is reversed. And instead of the legs and the hips and the body leading, they stay pretty passive and the arm is moving the racket forwards. not the legs, not the hips, not the shoulders. So that leads to a late contact point. It leads to a super tight follow through. Those are symptoms of the larger issue. Unfortunately, lesson after lesson, training session after training session, practice after practice, tennis players keep focusing on trying to hit the ball further out in front and finish their follow through and do all kinds of other things that are symptoms of not using the kinetic chain appropriately. So here's how to actually train good kinetic chain so all of those things can fall into place for you naturally. Exercise 1 to learn how to do this properly is to break up your swing, whatever the motion is that you're working on, into pieces and practice moving your body first before your arm and your racket actually go forwards. So look at this recent student of mine, how she's preparing for a pretend forehand and then turning her hips and her shoulders first without bringing the racket forward with her arm. Now notice her racket is coming forwards, but it's because her hips and her shoulders are turning in that direction. The arm isn't moving independently to swing the racket forwards. It's being brought around by the rotation of her body, which is the correct order in which it should happen. The goal here on the forehand specifically, we don't have time to get into every shot in tennis, but the goal on the forehand is to have the hips facing forwards and the shoulders facing forwards and the racket facing forwards by the time contact gets made. The next step I recommend is making a full smooth motion where you're practicing that correct order of hips and then shoulders and then racket following behind, and just make sure that you can coordinate it all together at the right time. This is looking super strong and fantastic now. And so now it's time to hit some balls. That's step number 3, is start off super easy and practice turning your body first, let your arm follow behind. And that's what's going to lead to the contact point further out in front. That's what's going to lead to the smooth, relaxed follow through, is having the body leading, the arm following, and actually getting to a forward facing position by the time you make contact. Just so you can see kind of aesthetically how powerful this is, here's my student before we did any of those drills. I want you to just watch the order in which her body is moving here and watch her comfort level around contact and watch how much effort and kind of tightness there is with her arm and her contact point and her follow through. See how she's kind of like struggling with her arm and her upper body a little bit to kind of get the racket through and actually hit the ball. And so here's what her contact point was looking like on a lot of her original swings before we did any of those drills together. Notice her position of her hips and her shoulders. And so that's leading to contact point further back in a weaker position. And now after doing those drills, this is what her forehand was looking like, just, I don't know, maybe half an hour or 45 minutes later. Just look at the difference in the order in which her body is moving, the smoothness in which her arm and her racket is traveling through the point of contact. And it's just from reordering what is going first, what's doing the work, what is actually providing effort and power and force, and what is smooth and relaxed and fluid. And so with that focus in mind, look at how different this contact position looks. Didn't say a single word to her about out in front or over your shoulder or anything like that. She's focusing instead on the core, most essential, fundamental things, which is the order in which the body moves. Something else the best players at your local courts are doing are minimizing their errors, because tennis is a game of errors. And I want to show you how to cut the amount of errors you make in half in your very next match. Just go to tennissecret.com, sign up for the free training, and you'll see some simple adjustments to your targets and your position to dramatically reduce your errors, win more matches. The third thing the best players at your local courts do and the average players don't is they consistently swing confidently and fully through each of their shots, unless the situation calls for something slower and more conservative and a little bit more defensive. Watch the racket head speed and just the overall confidence of this player in black. He's a 5.0 rated player. And notice how each of these swings is strong. It's got good length and good acceleration through each of these. And he's not showing like a big change or difference from one swing to the next and how his racket is moving through the ball. So we can't obviously just decide to be a 5.0 level player, but we can start to copy their habits. We can start to mimic how they confidently swing. Let's say 10 is as fast as you can personally swing the racket, and 0 is as tentative and careful as possible. In general, we have these 3 different responses or phases of play in tennis. Somewhere around the middle of your range, about 5 or 6 or so, is a neutral ball. And a good player like Mark, that 5-0 player, is going to be hanging out around in this zone for his average swing, somewhere kind of at the top end of neutral, maybe a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. And when he has a weak sitter, maybe he's going to swing it like an 8. And when he has a tough shot where he's stretched out in a defensive position, maybe he's going to hit it like a 2 or a 3. But his average is going to be somewhere in here. Good quality, solid racket head speed. Now, compare that to your average tennis player. Your average tennis player is kind of hanging out at the high end of defense and hitting most of their shots at like a 3 or a 4 because they're scared to miss and they want to just kind of stay in the points. Let's look at a real world example of what that looks like. Watch this player on this side, and I want you to, after watching Mark, just get a sense for her acceleration, her length of swing, her racket head speed, and watch how so many of these shots are just kind of careful and tentative, and she's just, like, the balls are going in play, but there's not a whole lot of confidence or acceleration, which means she's going to be very capped at what level she's going to be able to compete at. The lower your average swing speed is, the less competitive your shot's going to be against better and better players. So here's how to break out of that rut, step by step. I asked this player to first peg the meter and just hit 10 out of 10. I was like, just hit the ball as hard as you can. I don't care if it goes in or not. And watch the difference here. Watch the contrast and how long her swing is, how fast her swing is, how confident she looks, how athletically she's moving her body, and how dynamically she's moving the racket. Some of these shots she's actually making. Now, a lot of them she's missing because she's right at the edge of like how fast she can physically move the racket. So of course she's going to lose control. But this is just an exercise to start off to learn what does it feel like to actually go all out and propel my racket as fast as I physically can. Once she knew what 10 out of 10 felt like, I was like, okay, now let's dial it back just a little bit and now show me 6 out of 10. So in other words, remember the chart? Kind of right on the upper edge of like what a neutral shot would be. And now look at the difference here. And just, again, watch the aesthetic here for confidence, length, acceleration. These are now starting to look like solid competitive shots. Super different from the competitive points that we started off the morning with when I asked her to just play against me and just kind of do the best she could. The third drill I had her do is where the rubber really meets the road. Now there's a target zone. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but I put a basket here and here and here and here to create a box back here in no man's land. So her target zone is between the service line and the baseline and cross court. But here's the caveat. I'm behind her, monitoring her tempo. And if she ever drops below a 6 out of 10 swing speed, she has to go back to 0 again. So the goal here is to make 5 in a row to that target zone without slowing down her swing, without getting more tentative and more careful because she really badly just wants to make it go in the target zone. This is where you will dramatically improve your competitive results. When you can marry together a confident swing with consistent, accurate, precise results, now you're really cooking with gas and you can hit great, solid shots without having to slow down and be careful and just kind of push the ball in play. Apply what you learned in this video to start anticipating, using the kinetic chain, swinging confidently, and I promise you will become one of the best players at your local courts. Another thing the best players do is hit tons of spin on their serves. I'm going to hook you up with a lesson right now on the screen to go learn how to hit a great kick serve. Enjoy, keep up the great work on your game.